I don't believe men were created to be pawns in someone else's game. I believe we were created to be steward king. Men under authority, yes, but entrusted with real responsibility. Not perfect men, but disciplined ones. Men who rule themselves, serve God directly, and refuse to live in fear. King, not pawn. You know, if you asked most men what a king looks like, they'd probably describe power. You know, authority, control, respect, dominance. Basically, just a man above others, a man who commands, a man who takes. But when Jesus showed up, he didn't match that image at all, not even close. So, let's go ahead and talk about the movement that confuses everyone. Because there's a moment in Scripture that should stop you. You know, Jesus, the Son of God, the rightful King, he kneels down and he washes the feet of his disciples. Let that sit for a second. Okay, the highest authority taking the lowest position, not symbolically, but literally. And this is where everything breaks, because that doesn't make sense to the world, right? You know, kings don't serve, leaders don't lower themselves, power doesn't kneel. But here, Jesus did. And he didn't apologize for it either. He didn't explain it away. He said, I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done. This is the model, okay? Not domination, not control, not performance, but service, okay? So, in the real world, let's talk about the kind of man who doesn't need to prove himself. Think about the difference. You know, a man who is insecure needs to be seen strong, needs to assert himself, needs to control perception. But a man who knows who he is doesn't need any of that. He can serve without shrinking himself, and he can lead without performing for those around him. He can also speak without forcing it, because his identity is settled. You know, Jesus, he didn't serve others because he was weak. He served because he was secure. And this is what most men miss. You know, they think that humility is weakness. It's not. Okay, it's clarity. Humility is simply knowing who you are. And because you know who you are, you don't need to protect it. You don't need to prove it to anyone. You don't need to fight for it. So it's like the man who doesn't need to react, because there's a man who will walk into a room and he doesn't really need attention. He doesn't need validation. He doesn't need control. But when he speaks, people listen. Why? Well, it's simply because he's grounded. And that's what Jesus was. He wasn't loud. He wasn't reactive. He wasn't trying to win people over. He was simply aligned with the will of his Father. And alignment, it carries weight. So let's talk about leadership through sacrifice. Okay, because here's where we get much deeper. Because Jesus, he didn't serve in small ways. He served in the ultimate way. He gave everything. Not just comfort, not just time, everything. The cross, you know, it's not just a symbol. It's the ultimate act of leadership. Not taking from others, but giving for them. This is what makes a true king. A true king doesn't ask, what can I get? He asks, what can I give that actually matters? And that's where most men, sadly, they get it wrong, because they think that leadership is about authority and position and influence. But real leadership is about responsibility. Responsibility for others. Not controlling them, not managing them, but serving what is right for them. So, here is the hard kind of love, okay? This isn't soft. Serving doesn't mean agreeing with everything. It doesn't mean avoiding conflict or making people comfortable. Sometimes serving means telling the truth, setting boundaries, standing firm, even when it's uncomfortable. Because truth is love, and love is not passive. You know, Jesus was gentle and unmovable. He showed compassion, but he also rebuked when it was necessary. He welcomed people in with open arms, but he also corrected them when the time arose. That's what balance is. That's strength. That's leadership. So, why does this connect back to you? because everything we've talked about in this series so far leads here. You lost your identity, so you adapted. You try to control everything to feel safe. That's the version of you that collapsed because it couldn't sustain you. So you started letting go, of what you thought that you needed, and now you're ready to become something real. But it's not what you expected. It's not someone that's louder or more aggressive or controlling. It's someone who's more grounded, more clear, more aligned. Let's talk about the man who finally stands still for a second, because the man that stops finally, performing, stops adjusting for everyone around him, stops managing everything. He just stands. Not rigid, he's not defensive, he's grounded. And from that place, he begins to serve, not from fear, not from needing some other form of approval or some identity, but from truth. And this is the true king, a man who knows who he is, doesn't need to prove it, serves what is right, and stands when it matters. Jesus, he didn't come to dominate, he came to serve, and that's what made him king. Stop trying to become all powerful and start becoming aligned, because the man who serves from identity is the man who leads with authority. The world says power takes, the true king gives.